All right. Well, hello, and thank you so much for joining us. I am Yanika Daniels, and I am joined by,
Hi, folks. I'm Nicole Caridad Ralston.
and today we want to take a little bit of time just to talk a little bit about our manager training series that we offer, but we're going to give you a little snippet of a little bit of our sessions. Our training is called Manager Training Leveling Up for Modern Managers. And we'll give you a little bit about ourselves before we dive in. Yanika Daniels, I am based in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm the founder of Daniels Talent Solutions, and we offer a number of services. But over the last 20 years, I've done a number of leadership development trainings. I'm certified John Maxwell Leadership Development Trainer. And we've worked with nonprofits, education organizations, as well as state and local government organizations, specifically on managers and leadership and helping kind of those middle managers who may not have gotten that training before that is formal. And they're stepping into their first or second manager role. And so that's the sweet spot for us. And that's one of the reasons we're bringing the training to you today. So I'll pass it over to Nicole to talk a little bit about herself.
Yes, and hi again, folks. I'm Nicole with Caridad Consulting. I work primarily with nonprofits, some tech companies, and education-based organizations as well, supporting them in strategic planning, curriculum writing and design, leadership coaching, and also management and leadership training and workshops. Similar to Unica, love focusing on that middle manager sector in the workplace because they are often the folks that are experiencing pressure from both above and from their direct reports. And so really strengthening that band in teams and organizations can wildly transform cultures and the way that organizations work more sustainably. So Unique and I kind of dreamed this up to work together since we work across similar sectors and folks in organizations. And so we're excited to give you a little sneak peek of what this series looks like.
All right. So today we're going to talk a little bit about leadership starting within. And so as Nicole and I have stated before, that kind of middle manager band where you're just stepping into your role is really important. And so today we'll talk a little bit about how are you identifying those leadership values and capacity limits, and then exploring the law of the lid, which is a concept from John Maxwell. All right, so as we jump into this, I just wanted to start a little bit with like there are various types of leaders, right? There is not one cookie cutter solution to how you show up as a leader. All different styles are effective. And one of the biggest things is understanding who you are as a leader. And so we wanted to give you kind of a cadre of women in leadership and how they show up, from Melinda Gates, who is a philanthropist and is very analytical, data and research driven. And her focus aligns with kind of this conscientious leadership. And so she's looking at the data, the numbers, the impact, and using that in terms of how she shows up as a leader. To Marley Diaz, and she's a literary activist. And so she's one of the ones who has started the 1,000 Black Girls books. And she has kind of moved this global movement, but she uses her influence, not her social, energetic, persuasive, strong communication skills as she shows up as a leader. Also, Reshma, who founded Girls Who Code. So, thinking about psychological safety, how she creates space for people to show up for themselves. She's consistent. She prioritizes systems and being steady and showing up the same. And that's a way that she changes her community. And then Judge Sotomayor, right? She's direct. Anytime you talk to her, you see her, she's assertive, she's a communicator, she gives her opinions, she's results oriented and principled, and also intellectually rigorous. And all of these women, as well as yourself, might show up in a different way. And using your leadership skills and how you innately lead within is what's best for you. You don't necessarily have to mimic what someone else does as a leader. So, one of the things that we often don't do enough as leaders is actually reflect. And so, when I first stepped into my first leadership role and being a manager, I thought about like who was actually the best manager that I had ever had and what did I feel or experience. And sometimes when we have great managers or sometimes not so great managers, we learn and then we start to develop our own instinct. And so think about for a moment maybe the best manager that you've had. What aspect of their leadership did you enjoy? Did you admire? How did that leadership make you feel? And then maybe you can identify one or two characteristics that come to mind and feel free to kind of drop that in the chat. If I were to think about maybe one of the best managers that I've ever had, I would say that might have been one of my, not my first role straight out of school, but maybe my second role. And I was actually an engineer at Dell. And I think one of the things that made this manager so impactful was the way that they actually listened and thought about bringing in the ideas of others. And so as a leader, I always think about like, what are the thoughts of my team? I don't always have the best idea in the room. You surround yourself with great team members and people, and I think about how do I make space for their opinions, their thoughts, and how do we all take that into account? And so that's one of the characteristics that I admired about a manager that I've had, and I actually take that on myself. What about you, Nicole? Is there a particular manager that was great for you or a characteristic that stands out for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the strongest managers that I've ever had was really good at laying out the kind of boundaries of the role, while also being really clear of where I could really move with autonomy, which is important to me. So I very much value autonomy and be able to, build things and, test, etc. But still, knowing that about myself, it's helpful when I am working with managers or leaders who are still giving me very clear boundaries, right? Of like, this is kind of how far you can go. And so, similar to you, I mean, I certainly took that on when I started managing my first team of being very explicitly clear about where you can play and where you cannot, right? And so, I think that's something that I continue to take on in terms of, yeah, characteristics of a strong manager.
Thank you. I love that. And so both of us have like seen some greatness and tried to encompass that in how we both lead. So there are two steps that you can take to actually really define out what is your actual leadership style and what's your mission. So one is a very simple values exercise, and you can go right now to the internet and look up any types of values. But when you do that, think about like three to five, no more than five things that really describe how you want to show up as a leader. And we've given you just a list here. And one of the things that when I think about a value that's important to me, and also one that I've kind of established for my company, is around learning. And here it says learning just in general, but one of the values that we have at our organization is actually constant learning. So in this field where we're working with leaders, we do a lot of human resource support and work. Learning and being a learner is so important to me because things are constantly changing. And I don't want to, rest on something I learned 10 years ago or rest on something I learned like a year ago. Even now we have AI, we have things changing constantly. And so that is a value of mine. And I think about like, what are the professional development conferences that I'm attending? What are the certifications that I'm getting? Because I value that so much as a leader, I then think about how do I take that on as an organization and how do I provide that for my team? So I think about with my team, we provide professional development for consultants that work with us. And what does that look like? How do they want to grow and strengthen, whether it's for them to get their SHRM certification or for them to go and do a new task or exposure to something different? So, one of the values that I know is important to me is learning. So, I would encourage you to think about three to five of those values that are really important and think about how do you then How does that show up for you as a manager or a leader? Nicole, do you have one or so values that you also really think about when you describe yourself as a manager?
Absolutely. I would say there's two that come to mind. One, when I'm managing people in particular, is excellence. So I talk a lot about um, expecting and trying to lead with excellence versus perfectionism. And I try and get, again, very clear with folks that I'm managing or working with about the differences between those things. Things do not have to be perfect, right? But we are striving towards excellence to deliver, consulting sessions of excellence, et cetera. So that's one, and getting really clear about the differences between perfection and excellence, because I can see um, people getting pulled down into that like perfectionism spiral often. And then the other one I'll name is adaptability. I think, especially as I've become a business owner in my consulting work. Being able to uplift that value for both myself and my clients, in that when we're doing any type of work that's like team strengthening work or people development work, we have to hold space for things to shift, change, pivot, et cetera, right? And so getting really comfortable with adaptability. And so that's often a value that I'll name for myself in my practice.
Yeah, I love that. Sometimes I used to think that I was a flexible person. And then I figured I'm not, but I do want to be adaptable. And so I
Yes.
love hearing you say that because things shift. And so for those of you who are a part of this webinar today, thinking about those 3 to 5 values and actually writing them down. Why are they important to you? And how do you want to live those out as a manager? What does that look like for you on a day-to-day basis? So that's kind of step one with thinking about your leadership style. So let's talk about step two is like really identifying your mission. And so there are 5 areas that you really kind of want to think about um, for your mission. And we're going to kind of draft a mission statement. So the first thing you want to ask yourself really is what is your fundamental reason for leading? What is the overall aim that you want to choose? What is your why? Why are you in this position of leadership? Why do you want to be a manager? And be truthful with yourself. Sometimes we find ourselves knowing that we have something to shift or give to others. Sometimes it's a necessary thing that we must do as we learn and grow in our leadership. So really thinking about what is your fundamental reason. The second piece is your core values. What's the what? What's guiding you in your decision to be a leader? So I'm guided by joy and excellence and results. I'm also guided by inclusion. Like I talked a little bit earlier about learning and having people have their opinions being a part of my leadership style, but also making sure inclusion is happening in the decisions. Your how might be the behaviors or methods that are happening. And so for myself, I like to listen deeply to my staff. I want to invite them to act and give feedback. I want to remain open to critique, and then invest intentionally. And so, what are the behaviors or the methods of how you want to lead and how those values that you identified in the previous slide show up? And who are you doing this for? Who's your target audience? And let's be clear because some of us manage across teams, some of us manage direct reports, some of us are managing in a broader organization. And so, who are you serving as a manager? I serve my team, but I also serve on a broader organization. And I want to be committed to the voices both of my team, especially those who are not heard, but also thinking about our clients and how we show up as an organization. So when you're managing, you're wanting to think about who's that audience and what is the impact that you want to bring as a manager? What's that outcome? And so I personally want to build a high performing team. I want my team to be inclusive. I want us to have strong results and create a lasting impact. So when you do step one, thinking about your values, 3 or 5 values, then come back and start to kind of draft your mission statement in these 5 areas, knowing your why, your what, your how, your whom, and the outcome. So here's a sample. Oh, go ahead. Were you about to say something, Nicole? Go
Yes,
ahead.
I just wanted to add something. So, something folks
Yeah.
should know who are logged onto this webinar is that Yanika actually did a lot of the manager professional development for me when I was at another organization. And so I remember this exercise, and I just wanted to share that it is incredibly helpful, not only for self-reflection, but also I used it with my teams. So I would share it with my teams in onboarding, right? And would reshare it at least annually of like, here's a snapshot of me as a manager, like real brief, and these are the ways that I'm trying to show up and offer opportunities for, feedback from staff if this was in alignment with the ways that I wanted to move it, et cetera. But I really loved this tool, not only for the self-reflection piece, but also for the practicality of sharing it with new team members and continuing team members as well.
I love that. I love that, Nicole. I think both aspects are so important, right? We go to these trainings, we go to these
Mhm.
webinars, everything sounds great, and then we leave it.
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
not only how are you sitting down and actually reflecting on who you want to be as a manager, but then how are you sharing that, using that with your team, and making sure that these are practical things you can use. All right. Here's my example of what I wanted my own mission statement to be. And I would encourage you to take a little bit of time to write that down for yourself. And this is how I want to show up as a manager. So I really want to create joyful, inclusive environments where people can grow, they can produce great results. They are guided by excellence and they get feedback and they can learn. I can listen deeply. I can get critique because I'm not perfect and I can develop others. And why are we doing this? Because I really want our organization to be able to make an impact on the community that we serve. And so, as you kind of take these steps to think about your values, think about kind of your 5 steps of creating your mission, and then create your own statement and print it out. Have it, share it with your team, as Nicole said. But then also, is it something that you come back to every now and again and make sure you're holding yourself accountable to who you want to be and how you want to show up as a manager and leader? So, in your own time, just think about these things. Maybe there's some aha moments that you might have. Big questions. Why are you in this leadership role? Are you already leading in the way that you desire? Do you want to show up in a different way, or are there values that you want to bring to the table that you're not? And then maybe there are some gaps that you're seeing with, like, hey, I really want to be this ideal or inspirational leader in this way. Then how do I then get there? And so those are some clear things to just help you start to define who you are as a manager. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about then if there are some gaps, let's talk about what do we do with that. And so John Maxwell talks a lot about the level the leadership lid. And one of his quotes is the level of my leadership will determine the level of my effectiveness. That's an interesting one. So the level of my leadership will determine the level of my effectiveness. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the leadership lid to give you a little sneak peek into what that is. In our full series, we go a lot more in depth about what this is. All right. So let me explain it, given kind of McDonald's as an example. Everybody knows McDonald's, and so that's why we're kind of using it. And so McDonald's was started right in 1940 by Richard and Maurice McDonald. And they kind of took it for about 8 years or so before they kind of created this kind of speedy service system where you can kind of really get this fast food going. And so they were regional, they were successful, but it took a new leader coming in, Ray Kroc, to really think about how do you franchise and how do you expand. And so when we think about the leadership lid, there is a level that you will reach, but your team can only go as high as you are as a leader. Sometimes it takes, from a vision perspective, pushing yourself in a different direction to then take your team higher. In the McDonald's example, It needed Ray Kroc to come in with a different vision for them to see, hey, how do you unlock the global growth? So, thinking about yourself as a leader, where might be your leadership limitations, and how might you then expand them and grow them? And maybe it's professional development, maybe it's bringing in other team members to push you, but we always want to think about how, as a leader, where are we limited? And then how do we want to push beyond those limits? So, when we think about that leadership lid, there are a couple of areas that might be affecting it. One might be your own self-awareness, right? So sometimes we have blind spots. How great are you at knowing what your blind spots are, where maybe you need growth in, or what might not be your strength? Maybe it's an area that someone else needs to lean into. Emotional intelligence is also an area that can affect our lid. Being able to understand our team, where they are, how can they grow, be able to recognize when something's working, not working, recognizing how you uh, take on stress, how you support others when they're in conflict. Those areas of emotional intelligence all affect our lid. Vision and strategic thinking. So this is an area for me. I've always been like a detailed person. And so I had to realize and start to really work at like how do I envision a big picture? How do I think more strategically? And so this has been an area that I personally have been working on because before I started my business, I was always executing the vision of someone else. And so it took time for me to think about how do I create my own vision. People development and coaching. It could also be an area. Sometimes, especially when we work with these great founding businesses that have kind of started from this great vision, the visionary then needs somebody to help them manage people. So sometimes that's a great asset that you have, but also sometimes that might be a lid. It might be that you are a great visionary, but managing and coaching people, that might be an area where some development support might be needed. And communication and influence. We can all continuously learn how to communicate better, but also how do we influence others, both in our own organizations, but also in our community or also with our clients. So these are areas we want to think about with your lid. So in our session and our full workshop, we go a lot more into detail about what the lid is and why it matters. But I quickly wanted to just highlight that the higher your leadership capacity, the higher the potential of impact that you can have on your team and organization. If your leadership is limited, if it caps, then growth and results in effectiveness, no matter how talented your team is, that will have an impact on them. How many of us have heard like people don't leave organizations. They leave bad managers, right? We hear that all the time. And this is an example of your leadership lid, right? You can hire the most talented folks. But if you as a leader don't know how to effectively support and manage talent that you have, people will leave. And so talent alone isn't enough. You need strong systems. You need funding. You need people to can't outperform weak leadership. So, in essence, understanding your gaps as a leader, where you kind of hit the lid, is going to be really important to you as you grow your team, as you become a better manager.
And I would add, Yanika, because both of us in our consulting practice love self-assessments, right? And we've
We do.
talked about, we do. And we've talked about a lot of the work that you're talking about today really focuses on this self-awareness piece and emotional intelligence. And so one of the things I just want to quickly plug is that there are a lot of assessments out there that you can take that can start to illuminate some of these like hidden spots, right? Or gaps in your leadership that can even then show you not only what the gaps are, but also what are the other types of people people that you partner best with that balance out your strengths, etc. And so I know we both use DISC a lot, Yanika in particular,
Yeah.
which focuses on communication. And then I really love Gallup Strengths, or previously known
Mhm.
as Strengths Finder, that reveals kind of your top talents. But what I like about both of those, that it also gives you that companion piece of like, here's who balances and balances you out well, right? And so that you're not just left with, okay, now these are some gaps, but also what do I do? So I just wanted to add that because I know we both value self-awareness and assessments so much, and I think they've been transformative for how I lead as well.
I totally agree. And some people, um, think that, oh, assessments put you in a box. They don't.
Yeah.
They give you additional language.
Yep.
As you're saying, Nicole, they're helping you kind of understand where those gaps are, how to engage with other team members, how to build on each other's strengths. So never look at assessments as if they're putting you in a box or they're being very prescriptive. They're just a tool. And so when we think about the lid effect, there are a couple of things just to think about as a leader. You know, some things can keep us held back a little bit if we're wavering in our decision making, if our communication is a little weak, if we avoid conflict. We got to be able to delegate. We might not have the vision. We talked about other people development. So those are things that are keeping the lid on. So here's a couple of things of just how to raise the lid. One, invest in leadership development and not only invest in our training, yes, do that, but also really think about what are the ways that you as a leader can continue to develop. Make sure you are self-aware that there are feedback loops. You're asking your team and staff for feedback. You're asking your clients for feedback. We all have blind spots, and so making time to consistently get feedback from others is really important. Understanding how you delegate can empower your staff and your team. It also can give you some time, right? As a leader and a manager, sometimes we try to take it all on, and understanding how you delegate and empower others is important. And then the other key, one of the things that's been really important to me is surrounding myself with community of leaders, other people who are leading in a similar way or in a different way, and just learning from other people. So surrounding yourself with leaders is also really good. So these are just a few things, and we just wanted to give you a couple of snippets today about as you think about your leadership, how do you lead within? How do you define your own mission statement and the values that are important to you? How do you assess and identify, like, what are my own lids or what may be keeping me from being kind of the best manager or leader? And our training goes a lot more in depth about it, but this just gives you a little bit of idea of some of the key skills that you can do. So, our full workshop series, which has 5 sessions. We talk a lot. Today, we gave you a little bit about leadership starts within. We also have a session on people, power, and conflict. Conflict is a big one as you think
Mhm.
about understanding who you are. How do you handle conflicts? We are not going to always agree. And conflict is good. Productive conflict is a good thing to really get to the best answer. How do you build brave teams? Nicole will talk a little bit about this in our upcoming live webinar that's going to happen. And then our vision, strategy, and sustainable leadership is a great session. How many of us are burning ourselves out, right? How do we really think about our wellness and how do we sustain ourselves as a leader? And then we get a little bit into like the practicality of this. How do we put tools, systems, things in place for us as leaders to make sure that we're able to operationalize the way we want to manage? And so it's a great series. It's coming up, and we look forward to you joining our upcoming live webinar, but also our full workshop series. You can always get in touch with us. I am at Daniel's Talent Solutions, info at danielsolutionsllc.com. And Nicole.
I'm at caridadconsulting@gmail.com.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope you found a little snippet of our upcoming series very helpful, especially as you think about how you want to be a leader within.
Yes, thanks everyone. And we hope to see you at the live session where, as Yanika said, I'll focus on building brave teams and you'll walk away with a really helpful tool to accomplish that. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.